Hey everyone, it's Russ, and welcome to another episode of Women's Retirement Radio. Today I'm excited to be joined by Christine Luken. Christine is a financial coach. She has developed some courses, programs, written a book, has a lot of great resources on her website, many of which I'm sure we'll talk about, and I'll certainly include links in the show notes for this episode. But let's dive in. Christine, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad you could join us. Why don't we get started by just having you tell us a little bit about yourself personally?
Yeah. So my name's Christine Luken. I'm known as the financial lifeguard. I have been a financial coach for close to 13 years now. And I think the most important thing that people need to know about me is I didn't get into doing this work because I've always done things perfectly with my finances. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. I broke off an engagement in my mid-20s at age 26, and I hit financial rock bottom despite having an accounting degree. And that was a very shameful and embarrassing experience for me because I left this relationship with a lot of debt. I left the relationship owing payday lenders money, being behind on my car payment. I jokingly say if it's possible for a credit score to be negative, mine probably was. And, I had a good part of the reason why I had gotten myself into this situation was because the guy that I was engaged to had horrible money habits. He was in and out of jobs and even in and out of jail. I thought if I just loved him enough that he would change, and he did. He got worse. So, I ended up, having to completely start over in my late 20s, and it was embarrassing. It was an embarrassing situation for me to be in, especially because I should have known better. I had an accounting degree. I was actually working for a multi-million-dollar company as their staff accountant. And yet here I was bouncing my own checks at home.
Well, first of all, thanks for your willingness to share that. And there's a lot in there that I'd love for us to touch on in our conversation today. The shame and the embarrassment that you felt, and I know you and I were talking before we started recording about how you and I both seen that with other folks, especially women. But I also appreciate the fact that you don't speak from a position of perfection or having done it all right. I mean, clearly no one's perfect, but that you're willing to kind of admit and accept your mistakes or wrong turns in the past. And it sounds like you've used them to, find a better path for yourself.
Yes.
So, well, first of all, just thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. And I know our listeners will too. Could you maybe take just a second, Christine, and maybe give our listeners a little bit of a flavor or explanation? Like, what's the difference between a financial coach, what you do, and maybe a more traditional financial advisor, which is what I do?
Yes. Yeah. And what we do is very complementary. The easiest way for me to explain it in one sentence is a financial coach helps you become financially healthy. A financial advisor helps you to become financially wealthy. So as a financial coach, I am working with my clients on their daily money management habits. So we are looking at spending habits, making sure that we're tracking our spending, that we're being intentional with it. We are looking at making sure that our debt is manageable and we're making a plan to get things paid down, because we don't want to be carrying any more debt than we need to, because we don't want it to be stressing us out either emotionally or financially. And then we also work on various saving goals. So we want to have, most people call it an emergency fund. I like to call it a freedom fund because that actually sounds much more enjoyable. But, we do need to have this cushion that will protect us from those things that invariably happen, so that we don't have to put those emergencies on a credit card. And then I really dig deep into, habits and mindset, and helping people to understand, where they picked up these patterns for interacting with their money. Because sometimes we just do what our parents did. We just do what's been taught us, or, maybe our partner does things a particular way, and we took that on without really questioning it. And then we may have some of these habits that aren't really serving us anymore.
Yeah, it's so interesting in my conversation with other guests on the podcast, how emotion psychology, money habits, or what I've also heard referred to as money scripts, come up a lot. And I think that just underlines the fact that at the end of the day, money is a very emotion-filled topic. It touches virtually all aspects of our lives, and getting your habits, your behavior, your thoughts, your mindset around money can make a huge difference, maybe a bigger difference than virtually anything else that you can do. So I think it's super important, and I'm glad you shared that. So it sounds like you do a lot, and it sounds like, while complementary, there's also maybe some degree of overlap between the work you do and the work I do, as far as just helping people, as far as like setting up, to use your terminology, a freedom fund, and preventing the need to go back into, consumer debt and things like that. What else can you tell us about the work that you do, Christine?
Well, I really love working with women who are going through divorce, because that is a very emotional time. And there's actually a term called divorce brain, because divorce puts so much stress on people, both men and women, that, it can actually impair our decision making. When we are in this state of stress for a prolonged period of time, there's a lot of uncertainty and chaos, and, depending, even in the very best situations where people are agreeable about the divorce, there's still a lot of turmoil, and there's still a lot of emotion. And it is prime time for money mistakes, right? Because we can be making these decisions when we're not in the best place emotionally. And many of these decisions can have a long-lasting impact on our personal finances. And I think it is so helpful for people who are going through divorce to have the guidance of someone, whether it is a financial coach or it is a financial planner, who understands the emotional side of money, to help guide them through some of these financial decisions that need to be made during that transition.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've often joked that I'm not a psychologist, but I kind of play one in my head sometimes. But
yes,
it's interesting. I one of my amateur theories is that I think during divorce, I think you could argue that the family, whether it's a woman and her husband or partner, there may be children involved. I would argue that you could almost think of that like a family unit or a tribe. And when that tribe's being broken up, or you're leaving the tribe, whether by choice or by circumstances through a divorce, for example, I think it can literally trigger some of our ancient survival instincts, like kind of tap into our lizard brain. And I've heard the term divorce brain before, but I think that I've seen glimpses of that in conversations with some of my clients that have been introduced to me either during or after divorce, and just hearing kind of the tone of voice and things that some of these women have shared with me. It's like they're almost like feel like they're fighting for their lives. And in some respects they are. But it's super interesting just to take a step back and consider the role that psychology and mindset plays in money in general, as we've already addressed, but specifically when it comes to divorce. And I know you have done a lot of thinking and do a lot of work around money shame and embarrassment, and how that can almost kind of create this vicious cycle, especially in the context of a divorce. Do you want to maybe share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Because here's what I see. When I talk about the money shame cycle, essentially what happens is someone does something with money. They make a mistake with money, and then they feel ashamed about that mistake. And that shame makes them want to hide. And when you hide, you don't get the help that you need to fix the mistake or prevent future mistakes. And so that cycle continues. And really the critical point is right after you make a mistake, because we all make financial mistakes. Like, I still make financial mistakes. Like you said, none of us is perfect. And, there will be times when I spend emotionally and I spend more money than I thought. Now, it's not the way it used to be before I hit rock bottom, because I've got systems in place to make sure that those things don't happen very often. But we can still make mistakes. We're human. So when we make that mistake, I think sometimes people confuse the emotions of guilt and shame. So guilt tells us we've done something wrong. And we can use that guilt to basically fix our mistake, right? So if I do something wrong and I emotionally spend and I feel guilty about it, I can say, you know what, that was a dumb thing to do, Christine. But here's what I'm going to do in the future to fix it. Or maybe I need some more education on this particular issue, because maybe it was a mistake that I made out of ignorance, right? But I can use that guilt to remind me that something's wrong here and something needs to be fixed. Now, when that guilt gets transferred into shame, we basically say, instead of saying I did a bad thing, we now say I did a bad thing and therefore I'm a bad person because I did this. So there's a subtle, but it's a very distinct difference of, okay, I've made this mistake, I need to fix it, versus I made this mistake, I'm a horrible person. And then we turn inward instead of getting the help that we need. So it is hard to reach out to someone to get help. And I think I'm very encouraged that I am seeing trends change in the financial services industry. I am seeing a lot more of what I call heart-centered financial professionals like you, Russ. But there are still individuals out there in the financial services industry who, take that patriarchal view and, like to mansplain things to their female clients. And when someone has that experience, then it makes them not want to trust any financial professional, right? If they've had a bad experience, then it makes them feel like it's not safe for me to talk about these things. So my goal is to open up this conversation and to be very transparent about the mistakes that I have made, and to share tools and tips for women and men on how we can take better control of our finances and to educate ourselves. And so there's kind of two pieces here, which you and I talked about before we hopped on here. Is there's the competence piece of learning and applying that knowledge, but then there's also the confidence piece of I can do this. And women need both of those. right? We need to go and get that education and that, that skill building of managing money. And that actually does lead to the confidence, but it is a skill. And I think many times we are impatient with ourselves and we think that we should know how to do this. And if we don't, then we start to feel that shame, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Christine, what would you say? I know you mentioned earlier that you really have a passion for working with women during the divorce process. Clearly there's that's deep and fertile territory for a lot of opportunities to help, but there's also a lot of opportunities for people to maybe kind of get caught in that money shame spiral or cycle. Could you maybe paint a little a picture for us of how else you work with and help women that are going through the divorce process?
Yeah. So, there's some like typical emotional money mistakes that I see women making when they go through divorce. And they usually fall into one of three categories. So the first one is using money as a weapon. And usually this happens when they feel like they have been wronged by their partner. Maybe their husband cheated on them. Maybe they spent a bunch of money or ran up a bunch of debt. And so there's this very strong need for revenge against the other person. And when we use money as a weapon, what we forget is that is a two-edged sword. And even though we may think that we're taking a stab at our ex-partner, we're actually cutting ourselves as well, right? And I'll give you a good example of this. I have a good friend who's a financial planner, and he had this client who, her husband had cheated on her. She was getting half of his 401k assets, and she told him, I want to take $50,000 and cash it out. And he talked to her until he was blue in the face, trying to talk her out of this. And she would not be talked out of it. And so, he had to cash it out and give her the money. And she spent this $50,000 on a red BMW convertible because her thinking was, every single time I drop the kids off at his house or pick them up, I am throwing it in his face that I have spent this money on this car that I deserve. But the problem is, as you well know, when you figure in the interest and the penalties that she had to pay for that car, it was really more like $75,000 once you figure in the tax bill. And then all of the lost growth on that money, right?
Yep.
Like compounded over 10, 15, 20 years was probably hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I tell my clients, if you're feeling really angry, let's not put money in the middle of this. Let's find a productive outlet for your anger. I'll tell them, go take a kickboxing workout class, sign up for 8 weeks of kickboxing. You'll get in great shape and you will get that frustration out. Physical activity is wonderful for that. And, probably what I would have advised this woman do is say, what, once you get the divorce settlement, maybe we can take a couple $1,000s and you can, go take a beach vacation, or you can go buy a designer purse, but maybe 1/10 of that amount, right? Instead of $50,000. The other one that I see people making is the exact opposite, which is giving away the store. And I was guilty of this in my relationship because I just wanted out. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of fighting. I was a people pleaser. I did not like to fight. And that's essentially how my ex got me to cave in for him to get his way. Is he would provoke arguments with me, and because he knew he would wear me down. and I would give in to whatever he wanted. And so when I decided that's it, I'm leaving, we had jointly run up debt in my name. His car was in my name because he had a suspended license because of 2 DUIs. I should have taken that car and sold it to help pay off that debt, but I didn't. I just signed the car over to him and said, get this, I don't care whose name this goes in, but this has to get out of my name and out of my insurance. I left him most of the furniture. I didn't make him pay back any of the credit card debt because I was just done and I just wanted to leave. But the problem is, especially when you are in a divorce situation, it's really hard to amend things like spousal support agreements, settlement agreements, child support agreements after the fact. And sometimes women have a hard time advocating for themselves. I see women all the time where, they would lift up a truck with one hand for their child if if their child was in danger. But, it's almost like they don't protect themselves, but, they'll protect everybody else, but they won't stand up for themselves. And so sometimes I will tell them to appeal to a higher cause and say, look, every dollar that you don't fight for is a dollar that you don't have to help take care of your kids. And even if they don't have kids, most women I know are very generous and they have charitable causes that they want to support and represent. And I'll say, look, if you don't want to fight for yourself, I said, every dollar that you don't get that is rightfully yours, that's less money for you to be able to support these causes that are important to you.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that so many women just naturally fall into that caregiver role, whether that's children, minor children, or sometimes adult children, whether that's aging parents. And the analogy I like to use is that they often forget to put the oxygen mask on themselves first.
Yes.
And it's frustrating from where I sit, but again, it's a mindset and it's a psychology thing. So it's not something where they can just say, oh, well, I won't do that anymore. But it first takes some acknowledgement and some coaching from someone like you to kind of help them see the bigger picture and the pros and cons of that mindset, or not applying more self-care and prioritizing their own needs over those of others, or just like the story you gave about your relationship, just wanting to be done and basically wash your hands of it and move on. So
right,
and that can be expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's interesting you say that, because one of the things that I do with my clients, and you probably do something similar, if you're going to help to create a plan for someone to accomplish their financial goals, you need to know two things. You need to know, where are they right now, right? And that's like looking at all their numbers. But you also need to know, what is the goal? Like, what does your preferred financial future look like? If you woke up tomorrow and felt awesome about your money, like, what does that look like? What are the things you want? What are the experiences you want? What's the lifestyle that you want? And so I do that with all of my clients during our first session. I call it the dream session, right? Because I need to know what success looks like for you in order to help you build this plan for your personal finances. And, I was talking to a divorcing woman, 6 kids. They were, I think her youngest was maybe like a junior in high school. So they were starting to, cycle out of the household. And the divorce was like not her idea. She found out her husband was cheating on her, and it was, a lot of turmoil. And so, I was asking her, what are the things that you want for the future? And, she was like, well, I'd love to take a family vacation with my kids. And, a lot of the things that she said were relative to her kids. And I looked at her and I said, what do you want for you? like not for anybody else. I said, what's something that you want just for you and your own pleasure? And she started crying and she said, no one's ever asked me that before.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh, let me pass you the tissue, sister. I think we were both crying over that one. I was like, yes, this is what, and it took her a while. I mean, it really took her like 2 or 3 months before she could come, before she said, this is what I want for myself.
Yeah. What a great story. And
Yeah.
good for you for, having what I would maybe refer to as a breakthrough, whether that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And one thing I would add, I couldn't agree more. I think that, in any coaching or advice relationship, you need to first kind of inventory where someone is. And in a close second is figuring out where they want to go. What does success look like? What are their goals? What do they really want? Not what they think is expected of them, or not what they think other people want of them, but what do they personally want, deep down inside. And something else that I'm starting to introduce in my conversations is also, in addition to looking at where they're at and where they want to go, looking at where they're coming, where they've come from. So
yes,
not in a therapeutic perspective, not that we're looking backwards to try to fix something, but just to say like, hey, tell me about, what are your money memories? What was money like in your house growing up? Was there always enough? Was there never enough? What were your family's attitudes about debt or credit cards or saving or spending? Because to your earlier comments, I think that we often carry these childhood lessons, even though we weren't maybe explicitly taught these things that we learn about money, we carry them into adulthood, for better or worse.
Yes, absolutely.
So I love all that, but I'm starting to introduce some conversations around people's money history, just to so I can hopefully get a better understanding and hopefully give them a better understanding of themselves. So I think that's pretty interesting ground to cover as well.
Oh, it is, absolutely, because we need to cultivate awareness around that, because I find it very interesting, and you and I could probably do like 2 or 3 of these sessions really diving into the psychology of money and things of that nature. But one thing that I learned in the past several years, even after I wrote my book, Money is Emotional, is that children's brains are very different from adult brains, especially with children between the ages of like 2 and 7. You might have even said, if you have kids or nieces or nephews, when they're in that age range, that they're like a sponge.
Yep.
They're just constantly absorbing information, and their brain waves are different during that age stage, because they have so many things to learn in a very short period of time. Like they have to learn language, they have to learn, how to survive and thrive in the family unit. They have to learn how to, interact out in society. And children don't have the judging part of the brain that can reject something and say, I'm not going to believe this. So if your parents tell you something, you absorb that and it gets stored down in your unconscious mind as the truth, right? Like that's why you can tell a 4-year-old that there's a leprechaun or the Easter bunny hiding in the bushes and they believe you, right? But the bad thing is, if parents say things like money is the root of all evil, or you have to work really hard to make money, or there's never enough to go around, the same thing is true. We absorb that down into our unconscious mind as the truth, and it becomes part of what I call your money blueprint. So as adults, we are operating off of this money blueprint that's down in our unconscious mind that most of us aren't even aware that we have one. And so starting to bring awareness to that of, how did your parents talk about money? How did they handle money? what's your earliest memory of money can give you clues as to why you interact with your money today the way that you do. Quick story. I had a client who came to me and she said, I know I should be saving money, but she said, when I even think about going to the bank to open a savings account, I get anxiety. And I was like, well, that's like kind of the opposite of, most people, feel anxious if they don't have any savings. And so I asked her, I said, tell me about some of, how your parents handled money, early experiences, et cetera. And during that first session, nothing in particular really came up. But when she came back a couple of weeks later, she said, I think I know what's going on here. And she said, when I was 5, she said, I had a piggy bank. And anytime I got any money for birthdays or chores, whatever, I would put it in the piggy bank. And her brother was like 8 or 9 years older than her. And he stole the money out of her piggy bank. And she said, she's like, it's dumb. It was like $10. She said, my mom eventually figured, I went to my mom. My mom eventually figured out what happened. She made my brother, give me back the money. But she's like, I feel that same anxiety, like when I tell you this. And I said, well, that's because, when you were 5, I said, first of all, $10 is like $10 million to a 5-year-old.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I said, what did you do when your mom gave you that money back? And she said, well, I spent it. And I said, did you ever put any money back in that piggy bank? And she said, no, because it wasn't safe to put it there. Bingo. And I said, so see what you learned there as a 5-year-old, that it's not safe to save money. And so we did some mindset work around that, and we created some new mantras about, it's safe for me to save money. And just uncovering that memory and examining it from an adult perspective took the power away from it. And within the next 2 days, she went to the bank, she opened her savings account, and, has since been putting money into it every week ever since. But it's just like she didn't even know what that was holding her back. And it was that incidence of having money stolen from her as a little kid.
Yeah, but clearly it was holding her back. So
yeah,
I think there's a lot of power and empowerment that comes from, just identifying, naming, figuring out what it is or what they are, what these beliefs or lessons or unconscious thoughts that, mindsets that we carry with us sometimes, like you said, since early childhood that can, prove to be obstacles to us, making progress financially. And I think we would both agree, if you're not in a healthy financial position, that spills into all other areas, or it can spill into all other areas of life too. It can lead to stress, anxiety. Those can have health, like physical health,
absolutely,
impairment. So these kind of foundational beliefs can really have a far-reaching effect, for better or worse. So I think there's a lot of good in being thoughtful and being a little more self-aware and naming these things and putting yourself in a position to move past it. So thanks for sharing that story. What a great example of, these money scripts or these money blueprints, as you like to call them. That's fantastic. What would you, well, first of all, I agree to your earlier comment. I think you and I could easily talk for hours upon end about this stuff, and not blink twice about it. So we'll maybe have to have a part 2 or a part 3 down the road.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to doing that. But you've covered a ton. You do a lot of coaching, mindset work, helping people with, some systems and habits, and setting up, good behaviors around money, whether that's, kind of in isolation or in the context of something like a divorce. What would you say, Christine, is the biggest challenge that you help people address or solve through your work, through your writing, through your coaching?
Well, it's really, helping them to improve their relationship with money. And a lot of people don't think about it this way, but money is like the third person in your relationship. You're interacting with money every single day, and honestly, whether you're in a relationship or not, you're still in a relationship with money. You are going to, you're spending money, you're earning money, you're saving money, you're investing money, you're managing money pretty much every single day. It's rarely a day goes by that you are not having some sort of interaction with your money. And most people have never thought about that this is a relationship and to examine, is it a good relationship? Am I, doing the things that I need to be doing to cultivate a positive and peaceful relationship with my money? And it is that two parts. It is the mindset, how do I think about money? How do I talk about money? But it is also, what are those daily actions that I'm doing? Am I respecting my money? Am I spending quality time with my money? What do I need to learn to take my relationship with money to the next level and get it to the point to where I really feel good about it? And so I think it's really shifting the way that people look at their finances, rather than, the traditional old paradigm of, you have to have a strict budget and you have to follow all these rules and these formulas. And certainly, yes, there are basic financial principles that every personal finance, expert is going to agree on. Yes, we should save money. We should spend less than we make. We shouldn't have excessive debt. But, money is very personal. That's why we call it personal finances, right? And the ultimate goal of our money is to support our happiness. And so many people haven't really thought about what is it that I want money to provide for me and for my family. And it's rare that people have actually, cast that vision and said, this is what success will look like for me, and exactly how much money do I need in order to accomplish this. Most people will just say, well, I need more money if I want to improve my life. Well, how much more money? Like, what are you going to use it for? Right? So I think it's more of having this holistic, healthy relationship with money versus, I just need more of it, because that's not healthy either.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's a real lack of discussion in financial services and personal finance circles around how much is enough. And I think if you've got some idiosyncrasies or some behavioral or mindset issues around money, whether they're conscious or not, I think oftentimes more money is just going to magnify those issues.
Absolutely.
And I think the earlier you can get both your brain and your arms around them, and get on a path to, like you said, building a better, more healthy relationship with money, the better, because you'll likely get a better handle on how much is truly enough, and B, more money, whether that's earning, saving, investing, is less likely to exacerbate or magnify some of these maybe not so healthy mindsets, behaviors, habits. So I think that's super important.
Yeah.
So this is Women's Retirement Radio. Everything we talk about and work on comes back to helping women in their 50s and 60s plan for and have a successful transition into retirement. But clearly, retirement means different things to different people. So, Christine, when you think of the word retirement, what comes to mind for you personally?
Well, for me, I love the work that I do. And, I'm not sure that I will ever completely retire from doing this in some way, shape, or form. But I think, to me, retirement is, not having to do anything you don't want to do. If you have enough money to live the life that you want to live, whether that involves some work or not, just being in that position to where, if you don't want to work, if you want to take a day off, then, honestly, that's really the goal, right? And for, like you said, for everybody that looks different. When my husband retires from GE, he wants to be done, right? But for me, it's like, I'll probably still be writing. I'll probably still be helping people in some way, shape, or form with their personal finances. But, I think retirement is really about having the choice of how much you want to work, if you want to work, and still have that comfortable, secure lifestyle, whatever that means to you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you use that word choice, which comes up a lot in when I ask this question. Words like choice, freedom, independence, options, or optionality. And I agree. I think it's just having more freedom to choose how you spend your time, where you spend your time, who you spend your time with, and whether that's continuing to work in some capacity or not. I think it's just interesting to see the evolving thoughts around retirement, because clearly today it's very different than it was just 25 or 30 years ago, when everybody had a pension, you retire, and you hoped you lived another 15 or 20 years. People are living, potentially spending as many years in retirement as they did in their career in the future. So something to think about. What, specific to women, what do you think is the biggest challenge women face when they're planning for retirement, Christine?
Well, I think it's really a matter of understanding what their options are, and, really finding someone that they work well with to help them plan retirement. And I encourage all women, whether they're married or not, to take an active role in their personal finances. It can be real easy to just abdicate that to your spouse, especially if they are a numbers person. I coach a lot of women who are divorcing financial professionals. They're divorcing a financial planner, they're divorcing a CPA, and they really don't have any idea of what's going on. And I'm sure you've heard this statistic that 80% of women at some point in their life will be 100% responsible for managing their finances. So, it is important to get involved and understand what's going on with the personal finances early and often, to be having those conversations and understand what you have, and have that relationship with the financial professionals in your life, whether it is your tax person, your investment person, your banker, et cetera, to keep that education going.
Yeah, I agree. Hearing you say that, I'm reminded of something you said earlier, which really kind of resonated with me, which is the ideas of both competence and confidence. And I think the earlier and more often that women are involved in their finances, whether they're on their own or in a relationship, I think the more involved they are, that's going to breed more familiarity, and more familiarity is going to breed more comfort, which leads to both competence and confidence, which I think I would agree. I think women, I think everyone, but women especially, need both. I think if you've got one and not the other, that can also potentially lead to problems. And so, I couldn't agree more. So, so clearly the work you're doing, Christine, with coaching and writing and some of your programs and courses that you have available on your website, your book, I know you love working with and serving women. I know you have a particular passion for helping women that are dealing with divorce. But thinking about women in retirement, how would you say that your work most impacts women and or their families as they're looking towards retirement?
Well, I would say it's really, them having the confidence of knowing that they're going to be okay. Um, a lot of women who come to me for coaching, especially the single women, um, it's like they don't know, they're not sure if they're going to be okay. They're not sure if they're overspending. Um, they don't know when it's okay to loosen up and be able to enjoy some of their money. And many of them are, living in this state of constant anxiety. And I think just that process of feeling in control of their personal finances and knowing how much it's okay for them to spend every month because they are still going to meet their retirement goals, it just allows them to relax in a place deep down in their soul where it's like, money is not constantly stressing me out. And, for many people, that's a huge shift. That's a huge shift of having that peace of mind.
Yeah. And it goes back to, in my mind, it goes back to something you mentioned just a moment ago, which is the idea of retirement being about choice and freedom. And I think that if money is this constant source of anxiety or stress, I think that's going to limit people's sense of freedom or independence or choice. So I think those two can very likely go hand in hand. So
yeah,
I think that's super important. As we start to wrap up, something I always like to ask our guests is if and when you do have an hour or two all to yourself, because I know you're busy. How do you most enjoy spending your time when you've got a little time to yourself?
Well, it's summer right now as we're recording this. So I like to golf. I'm not very good, but I love hitting the golf course with my dad. So he'll be 76 next month. And I really, cherish that time of hanging out with him and learning from him to be a better golfer, and just being out in nature and not taking myself too seriously because I usually don't keep score.
Speaking from experience, that's probably that's probably a good thing when it comes, at least speaking from my golf exploits in the past, is I found it to be an exercise in frustration, but it was a good excuse to get outside and spend a few hours walking around and chasing a little ball, often in the woods for myself. I don't think I asked you this earlier. Tell me, tell us again where you're based, Christine.
So I'm actually in the Cincinnati area, but I do coach women all over the US and even in Canada. So now that we're in this mobile Zoom world, there are no borders. So I enjoy working with couples and women everywhere. So it's a lot of fun.
Great. So we've covered a ton. I think we both agree we could probably continue the conversation. We'll have to do that another time. But if there were one thing that our listeners could take away from our conversation today, if there was one thought or idea or one action item, what would you want that one thing to be?
Well, I think it would be, to recognize that you do have a relationship with money and commit to improving that relationship with money by spending time, managing your money wisely, learning, and really starting to, take both those practical steps and, to be thinking about the mindset of how am I speaking about money? How am I thinking about money? Because this is a lifelong relationship that you have with your money. And, why not let it be a good one?
Great question, and maybe a good place to wrap up our conversation. And clearly, one of the ways that you can work on your relationship with money is reaching out to Christine. So, Christine, what's the best way for people to learn more, reach out, get in touch if they're interested in doing so?
Absolutely. They can go to my website, which is my name. So it's christineluken.com. And if they are interested in learning more about the emotional side of money, they can download the first 3 chapters of my book, Money is Emotional. at moneyisemotional.com. I jokingly say it's like the least boring personal finance book you'll ever read because it's half tabloid of my life as I crashed and burned financially. But then it's also half financial how-to, how to harness the power of your emotions instead of fighting against them so that you can improve both your relationship and your results with your money.
Well, that's fantastic. We'll be sure to include links to your website, to your book website in the show notes, in addition to other ways people can find you online or on social media and that sort of thing. So, Christine, this has been fun. I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. I'm sure our listeners will enjoy it too. So thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. And hey, everyone, thanks again for your time and for listening. This is Russ. This has been another episode of Women's Retirement Radio, and I look forward to catching up with you on our next episode. It's Russ again. And before you go, I want to provide a brief disclosure. You should consult a financial advisor familiar with the specific circumstances of your unique financial situation before making any financial decisions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes a solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Any mentioned rates of return are historical or hypothetical in nature and are not a guarantee of future returns. I'm a financial advisor and an investment advisor representative of WealthCare Capital Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor based in Richmond, Virginia. The views discussed in this podcast are my own and may not be consistent with or represent those of WealthCare Capital Management.